Concurrent schedules. During the concurrent schedules phase, both hoops were placed into the training platform and the outer edges of the hoops were touching. The feeding wand was then placed behind the hoops located directly between them, so where the hoops were touching, the feeding wand was placed a couple of inches behind the direct middle of that. The small hoop was placed on an FR2 schedule of reinforcement, and the large hoop was placed on a VR5 schedule of reinforcement. A response must occur within 1 minute of presentation of the feeding wand, or a 0 was marked for both targets. If the subject swam through one of the hoops, then a 1 was recorded for that trial for that hoop, and a 0 was recorded for the hoop that was not swam through. Reinforcement was delivered according to the assigned schedule. Trials were separated by 30 seconds, and there were 5 trials conducted per sessions. Phase 10 was discontinued after 10 reinforcements were obtained on one schedule. Here's a video of the concurrent schedules training phase. You can see the wand is directly between where the 2 hoops are, and they are slightly touching. The subject then swims through the large hoop. Reinforcement is not delivered as it is a VR5 schedule. Here's a second trial. Reinforcement is delivered on the second trial. The subject independently swam through the hoop without the presentation of the feeding wand. For the small hoop, and this behavior will be reinforced on the FR2 schedule. And here the subject swam through the large hoop again. No reinforcement was delivered. And again, no reinforcement was delivered as it was a VR5 schedule. Results. A total of 44 sessions were conducted. 6 sessions were in baseline, 24 sessions were in training phase 1, 4 sessions in training phase 2, and 10 sessions in the concurrent schedules phase. Baseline had a 0% responding for both operant responses, meaning that the 3 sessions for the large hoop were at 0% for every single session, as well as 0% for the small hoop for all 3 sessions. Since this was the criteria to move on for consistent responding, the next phase was initiated, which was training phase 1. Sessions 7 through 23 were low with mild variability. The mean was 6.52% responses for those initial trials. The range was 0 to 20%. Following that, sessions 24 through 30 increased significantly, showing an increasing trend in responses until mastery criteria was reached. The mean percentage of response was 60. The range was 40 to 100%. Following that was training phase 2. The data show steep increase in operant responses after the first training session of this phase until mastery criteria was reached. The 4 trials in this phase resulted in a mean percent of responding at 60%. The range was 80%. During the concurrent schedules phase, the median percentage of responses for the FR2 schedule, which was the small hoop, was a mean of 50%, and the range was 40 to 60%. The median percentage of responses for the VR5 schedule, the large hoop, was mean of 50%, and the range was 40 to 60%. Here's a visual analysis of the data. My phase points didn't show up, but here after 6, the first training phase was initiated for 7 through 30, and you can see the low rates of responding with mild variability here, and then a sharp, steady increase that goes into the actual mastery criteria. Following that, the next training phase was training phase 2, and that only had 4 trials, and that was a very, very steep increase in responding behavior. Here are the concurrent schedules of reinforcement phase, and you can see that they were very similar in their responding. So there were some differences in training phase 1 and 2, the biggest one being that training phase 1 lasted much longer than training phase 2. This could be due to desensitization of the training equipment during the first training phase, as the subject had never been exposed to any of the training materials, including the platform, the hoop, and the feeding wand. Also, the shaping consisted training the subject to understand that the feeding wand provided reinforcement, whereas by phase 2, the subject had already learned that the wand delivers reinforcement and was desensitized to the training materials. The equal mean percentage of responding there was an equal mean percentage of responding for FR2 and VR5 schedules. They were both at 50% responding, which was pretty interesting to see. But this was similar to Ryder from 1979, his findings of the FR and VR schedules producing similar results when the difference between the response requirements for reinforcements were small. So FR2 and VR5, there's really not a very large difference between the two, as there's only 3 responses different within there. The equal mean percentage could be attributed to multiple factors, which is that they are both dense schedules. So the subject was receiving a dense schedule of reinforcement on both schedules. The difference between the delivery of reinforcement is only 3 responses, which is a very small difference compared to a FR2 and a VR80, let's say. The increasing probability on a VR schedule that is already dense. So, you know, the first opportunity, it's a 1 in 5 chance, and then if reinforcement is not delivered, then it's a 1 in 4 chance, and then a 1 in 3, and a 1 in 2, and then a 100% chance eventually. So the increasing probability probably resulted in increased responding on the VR5 schedule, whereas the subject also knew that there was a very dense schedule, and on every second delivery or every second response they would receive reinforcement on the fixed ratio schedule. The small hoop was on the FR2 schedule, and that was actually the last training phase prior to the concurrent schedules phase, which could also contribute to why the fixed ratio schedule had so many responses. Generally, the VR schedule could produce more responses, but in this case, the two were very similar. So having just moved from the small hoop training phase into the concurrent schedules, the subject was conditioned to be swimming through the small hoop and had not had contact with the large hoop since the initial training phase of training phase 1. Overall, future research should look at larger differences in the number of reinforcements on each schedule. So as mentioned, you know, doing a FR2 or a VR80, and then also look at the reciprocation. So not only how many responses are occurring in these different schedules with larger differences, but then switching it so that the VR schedule is denser than the FR schedule and having a large difference between those and seeing the effects that this could have on behavior.